Picking metrics. How do you actually pick, track, manage, and improve KPIs in your company? What are the practical steps? I'll start with a brief overview of the whole process so you can see how all the parts fit together. I'll then talk about each step in more detail. The process starts by picking your metrics and then set targets for those metrics. After that, you present the KPIs and targets to employees and their stakeholders. Finally, you'll monitor and manage the KPIs throughout the year. Those are the four basic steps. Who should be part of the process and who should lead it? It's different for every company. For a small company, the metrics and KPI dashboard may be developed by just the owner or the owner and a few key people. For a larger company, it starts with the board. The board will set the very high level strategy and then should receive periodic monitoring and performance towards that strategy via a KPI dashboard. The CEO and executives must be committed to it. Much of the picking of metrics and targets will be done by top executives. The actual metric and target selection process may be led by the CEO or a senior financial executive, like a CFO. The CFO is not leading this as a dictator, but rather facilitating a discussion as one who is well versed in performance measurement and management. The metrics themselves cover all functions of the company, so leaders from many areas will need to provide input. Now let's look at the details for each step, starting with picking metrics. Many of the concepts for picking metrics were covered earlier in this course. Your KPIs will likely change year to year based on the evolving strategy of your company. Even if your strategy doesn't change, you may need to emphasize some metrics one year and other metrics the next year. Be very specific on how to measure the metric in the meeting or session when you select your metrics. I've found that people need more time deciding the best way to measure a metric than identifying what they want the KPI to accomplish. For example, let's say you want to reduce spending next year. Should you measure it as total budgeted expense dollars next year, change in expense dollars next year, change in expense from this year to next year as a percent of revenues? There are many other options than those three. Each option has pros and cons. The discussion about which metric to use will expose how differently each person thinks about the expense situation. Clarifying the metric will align everyone. The right metric is the one that's accurate and understandable. Accurate means it best measures what you want to accomplish. The metric must also be understandable for the employees that will be achieving those metrics. Some metric formulas are so complicated that you'll just confuse people if you try to roll it out company-wide. You may need to pick a metric that's similar but easier for people to understand. It's not motivational if it's confusing. You will also need to decide how often to measure a metric. Monthly is very popular. Some are measured only quarterly. You may decide to monitor some metrics every day or every week. The frequency may also differ by person or organization level. For example, a CEO may only review a metric monthly that a department manager reviews every day or week. Once a metric is chosen, someone should be accountable for that metric. What are the responsibilities of that person? Their responsibilities include researching and recommending a target for the metric, setting up the ongoing monitoring process for the metric, monitoring the metric throughout the year and researching any issues, developing plans to improve performance as measured by the metric, implementing those plans. They don't need to do all these things themselves. Others may help them with their duties. My accounting and finance staff often worked with executives to help them measure, monitor, and research their metrics. I worked at one company where senior leaders were assigned metrics in areas other than their span of control. It was a way for these leaders to learn about other parts of the company. They couldn't directly control leaders and staff whose daily job most impacted the metric. Instead, they had to partner with those leaders and staff to improve the metric. Wow, so many choices, and all we've done so far is pick the metrics. We haven't even decided on targets yet. That will be our next step.